Chapter 18, Quiet Keto. Ketosis fundamentally changes the way your brain operates, unlocking your potential to experience improved mood, mental clarity, emotional resilience, and peace of mind. In this chapter, you will learn how to determine whether a ketogenic diet is appropriate for you and how to make your transition to ketosis as comfortable as possible. Remember, before trying any ketogenic diet, follow quiet paleo for at least 2 weeks first to allow your glucose and insulin levels to come down more gradually. Look before you leap. Ketogenic diets are powerful metabolic interventions that can lower blood sugar, blood pressure, and insulin levels very quickly. These are healthy changes, but if they happen too fast, it can be uncomfortable or even potentially dangerous, particularly if you're taking medications that lower blood sugar or blood pressure. Combining medicines such as these with a ketogenic diet could result in dangerously low blood glucose and/or blood pressure. So it's critically important that you notify the professional who prescribes these medicines for you well before you begin this diet to make sure they are willing and available to work with you to order laboratory tests, monitor your symptoms, and make any necessary medication adjustments. I recommend both medical and psychiatric supervision while transitioning to a ketogenic diet, especially if you're taking prescription medications of any kind, have any pre-existing medical conditions, or have ever had any serious mental health symptoms such as suicidal thinking, self-injury behaviors, manic episodes, psychosis, dissociation, aggressive thoughts or behaviors, or bouts of confusion. Even if you haven't had these symptoms lately, there is a small chance that they could temporarily resurface during the first few weeks of the ketogenic diet as your system finds its new equilibrium. Your safety is of the utmost importance. This audiobook is not intended to be your only guide to ketogenic diets for mental health. It is meant to be a source of information to support you and your healthcare providers and increase your chances of success. If you don't have access to appropriate health professionals, see Appendix B in your accompanying PDF for suggestions. You should not use this chapter to start a ketogenic diet if you are under the age of 18, underweight with a BMI of below 20. BMI stands for Body Mass Index. See Appendix B of your accompanying PDF for a link to calculate your BMI. If you're pregnant or breastfeeding, or taking an SGLT2 inhibitor such as canagliflozin, brand name Invokana, dapagliflozin, brand name Farxiga, or empagliflozin, brand name Jardiance. You should also not use this chapter to start a ketogenic diet if you have any of the following conditions: anorexia nervosa, a mental health crisis situation such as new or worsening psychosis, suicidal thoughts, mania, agitation, aggressive or violent thoughts, confusion, or a recent traumatic experience, active substance abuse, acute injury or medical illness such as influenza, burns, appendicitis, head injury, COVID-19, or pneumonia, kidney failure, acute pancreatitis, porphyria, or any of the rare genetic disorders of fat and ketone metabolism usually diagnosed in infancy that interfere with the body's ability to use fat and/or ketones for energy. These include glycogen storage disease type 1, primary carnitine deficiency, carnitine palmitoyl transferase deficiency type 1 and 2, carnitine translocase deficiency, pyruvate carboxylase deficiency, succinyl-CoA acetoacetate transferase deficiency 2, acyl-CoA dehydrogenase deficiencies, beta-ketothiolase deficiency, methylmalonyl-CoA epimerase deficiency, and 3-hydroxyacyl-CoA deficiency. Consult with a specialist first if any of the following situations apply to you: diabetes type 1 or type 2, heart disease, history of bariatric surgery, pancreatic disease, kidney disease, liver disease, gallbladder disease or having had your gallbladder removed, if you're prone to kidney stones, if you have gout, if you're taking medications for diabetes, high blood pressure, or heart disease, cancer. The book Keto for Cancer by Miriam Kalamian is a comprehensive and compassionate guide. If you have epilepsy, the Charlie Foundation website is a treasure trove of information. Or if you're an elite athlete, see the work of Dr. Jeff Volek, Dr. Stephen Finney, Professor Tim Noakes, and Dr. Karen Zinn for guidance. Connect with your clinicians. Contact your medical and psychiatric care providers to let them know you'd like to try a ketogenic diet and ask if they'd be willing to help you. In addition to your medical and psychiatric practitioner, you also have the option of involving a dietitian or nutritionist who is knowledgeable about ketogenic diets to help personalize your eating plan, and or a keto coach or counselor for guidance and support. Refer to Appendix B in your accompanying PDF for help locating keto-savvy clinicians. If your medical and psychiatric clinicians aren't supportive, ask them to share their concerns with you. If their concerns have to do with the particulars of your medical or psychological situation, hear them out. If you disagree with their assessment, gather feedback from others you trust or request a second opinion. If your clinicians are generally uncomfortable with the idea of ketogenic diets or view ketogenic diets as unhealthy or unsafe for everyone, ask if they're open to learning more. There are resources for health professionals listed in Appendix B of your accompanying PDF. If they're not interested or don't have time, you may need to seek out new healthcare providers or consultants, especially if you take prescription medications or have any serious pre-existing health conditions such as diabetes, high blood pressure, or heart disease. Estimate your keto macros. The process of determining your macronutrient requirements for a ketogenic diet is essentially the same one outlined in the previous chapter, with the main difference being that you'll need to lower your carbohydrate intake enough to allow your metabolism to shift into ketosis. Your age, metabolic health, activity level, pre-existing medical conditions, body composition, stress level, medications, and health goals all help determine your personal carbohydrate limit, protein requirements, and ideal fat intake. Use the principles that follow to estimate your macronutrient starting points and adjust from there as needed. If you prefer to use an online tool to calculate your estimated macros, please see Appendix B in your accompanying PDF for suggestions. Step 1. Prioritize protein. Your protein requirements won't be any higher on a ketogenic diet than on a paleo diet, so use your estimated protein target, refer to the previous chapter, as your starting point and adjust from there if needed. Step 2. Customize carbohydrate. Like many ketogenic diets, quiet keto starts at approximately 20 grams of carbohydrate per day because that is low enough to allow most people to shift into ketosis. However, since carbohydrate tolerance varies, some people may need to lower their carbohydrate even further to produce ketones, while others can get away with well over 20 grams per day and remain in ketosis, particularly athletes and people whose jobs are physically demanding, because working muscles draw glucose out of the blood and burn it for energy. Since carbohydrates on quiet keto come almost entirely from fruits and vegetables, your carbohydrate tolerance will determine the quantity of fruits and vegetables you can safely include. Most people will need to limit their non-starchy vegetable intake to 2 to 3 cups per day spread over the course of the day, and keep fruit intake very low, a handful of berries, for example. There are 2 popular ways to count carbohydrate grams: total carbohydrate grams encompass all digestible and indigestible carbohydrates, including sugars, starches, fiber, and sugar alcohols. Net carbohydrate grams include only the fully digestible carbohydrates, total carbohydrate minus fiber and sugar alcohols. The meal plans in this audiobook track total carbohydrate grams minus fiber grams, but do not subtract sugar alcohols. If you find you have trouble achieving ketosis using this definition, try counting total carbohydrate grams instead. Step 3. Figure in fat. The remainder of your calories should come from fat. In most cases, there's no need to intentionally count or limit fat calories because a well-formulated ketogenic diet tends to regulate appetite nicely, making it easier to trust your instincts about how much to eat. It's uncommon to gain unwanted weight if you're in ketosis because your insulin levels aren't high enough to turn fat storage enzymes on. Tip: 1 tablespoon of fat of any kind equals 14 grams of fat, or about 120 calories. Therefore, protein plus carbohydrate calories equals 380 calories per day. The rest of your calories should come from fat. If you require 1,800 calories per day, 1,800 calories minus 380 calories equals 1,420 calories of fat. Meat, seafood, poultry, and eggs. Stay within your daily protein allowance for best results. No need to trim fat or remove skin. Minimize aged, cured, smoked, and processed meats because they can be high in histamine. Refer to Chapter 19. Non-starchy vegetables. Count non-fiber carbohydrate grams and stay under your personal limit. Macronutrient calculation example. I walk you through an example of how to calculate your macronutrients in the accompanying PDF. In your accompanying PDF, you will also find a detailed quiet keto food list. Since the quiet keto diet is simply a very low carbohydrate version of the quiet paleo diet, the only difference between the two food lists is that the quiet keto list excludes high carbohydrate fruits and starchy vegetables. Following quiet keto for at least 6 weeks is the most efficient way to maximize your results. But if the idea of giving up dairy or nuts for that long is a non-starter and you would prefer a diet with a broader food list, feel free to use a different ketogenic diet. Just make sure it contains adequate protein and that it's based on healthy whole foods. I recommend reading the article, The 10 Defining Characteristics of a Well-Formulated Ketogenic Diet on the Virta Health website, written by Dr. Stephen Finney and Dr. Jeff Volek, and referring to the ketogenic diet resources in Appendix B of your accompanying PDF. Ketone monitoring. Measuring ketones isn't mandatory, but I strongly recommend it, especially early on, because it will help you get a feel for how your eating plan affects your metabolism and how your metabolism influences your mental health. You may recall from Chapter 5 that when you're burning fat, your liver breaks down that fat into 3 different types of ketones: acetoacetate, acetone, and beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BHB. Acetoacetate is unstable in the bloodstream, so some of it escapes into your urine, and some of it spontaneously turns into acetone, which you exhale. Blood ketone monitoring. The most accurate way to measure ketones is with a blood meter, which measures beta-hydroxybutyrate, or BHB. Choose a meter that measures both ketones and glucose, such as the Keto Mojo GK+. Testing requires that you prick your finger or your toe. However, measuring once a day is usually sufficient, and once you learn how to keep yourself in ketosis, you can measure less frequently. Urine ketone monitoring. Urine testing, which measures acetoacetate, is easy, inexpensive, and painless. The darker the color on the test strip, the higher the acetoacetate level in your urine. This method is imprecise because the amount of acetoacetate in your urine will vary depending on many things, including how hydrated you are, how long it's been since you last emptied your bladder, and how efficiently your body is using acetoacetate. Urine testing essentially measures how much acetoacetate your body has lost since you last emptied your bladder. So it can't tell you whether you are in ketosis in real time. However, urine strips will give you a yes-no answer about whether you've been in ketosis over the past few hours, and that is very useful information. Breath ketone monitoring. Breath testing, which measures exhaled acetone, is painless. And while the meter itself is expensive, it doesn't require test strips, so it can save you money over time. And you can test as often as you want. All of these testing methods give you valuable information, but I recommend blood testing if you can afford it because it is most accurate and provides real-time data. Some people like to combine once daily blood testing with more frequent urine or breath testing because they're curious to know what is happening to their ketone levels throughout the day. If you're using a blood meter and testing only once a day, I recommend testing before your first meal of the day while you're still fasting. If you can extend your overnight fast by delaying breakfast for at least 2 hours, that will give your brain a little more healing time each day. Testing before your first meal gives you the cleanest baseline for comparing ketone levels from one day to the next, because your food choices, stress levels, and exercise patterns can cause your ketone levels to vary quite a bit from one day to the next, which is normal. Also, ketones tend to rise as the day goes on, so if you only test later in the day, you won't know if you've been in ketosis all day long or only for the second part of the day. Many people feel better if they are in ketosis all day. Ketone target range. Refer back to Chapter 9 for a refresher on this topic, but I recommend you begin by aiming for blood ketone levels of between 1.0 and 3.0 millimolar and try to stay within that range most of the time every day for at least 6 consecutive weeks. Breath meters measure acetone in ppm, or parts per million. Therapeutic ketosis corresponds to levels ranging between 10 and 40 ppm. If you're using urine strips, aim for moderate to large ketones, medium to dark color. Some people find they need to keep their ketones within a particular range to feel their best, while others are less sensitive to ketone levels. As you gain more experience with the diet, you'll get a feel for what your personal therapeutic range is. If you are achieving your goals despite ketone levels running on the low side, there is no need to try to raise them. Treat your symptoms, not your ketones. The longest mile. Keto adaptation. Getting into ketosis can take as little as 3 days, depending on your macros and the particulars of your metabolic situation, such as age, physical fitness, health conditions, and medications. But just because you see a nice ketone reading on your meter doesn't mean your cells are efficient at burning them for energy yet. As your metabolism switches from burning mostly glucose to burning mostly fat, there can be a period of discomfort as your system adjusts and finds its new equilibrium. Some people are metabolically flexible and shift comfortably into ketosis. If you're under 40, physically fit, or your metabolism is relatively healthy, you're more likely to fall into the flexible category. Whereas others may experience keto flu symptoms such as difficulty concentrating, irritability, headaches, carbohydrate cravings, lightheadedness, trouble sleeping, leg cramps, palpitations, low energy, poor exercise tolerance, nausea, diarrhea, or constipation. These can last from a few days to about 2 weeks at most, but if you follow the recommendations in this chapter, transition symptoms will likely be very mild or may not occur at all. As unfair as it is, some people with mental health conditions face additional challenges as they transition to ketosis. These may include the temporary worsening of anxiety or depression, the appearance of mood swings, or even hypomania, mild manic symptoms such as sleeplessness, increased energy, anxiety, and hyperactivity. In my experience, these don't happen to most people, and when they do occur, they almost always resolve by week 3. You can minimize and often avoid both keto flu and psychological discomfort by doing the following things. Transitioning gradually to a ketogenic diet by following quiet paleo for at least 2 weeks first. Actively replenishing electrolytes throughout the day. We'll come back to this shortly. Staying well hydrated. Keeping stress low. Prioritizing sleep. And going easy on exercise. If these strategies don't help enough, you might also consider briefly using a ketone supplement or MCT oil to support slightly higher ketone levels during the transition. We'll return to this shortly as well. If you experience any psychological symptoms during the transition that are too great to bear, interrupt the diet by having a whole food carbohydrate-rich snack such as a banana or half of a sweet potato, and you should feel better within an hour or so. Take care of yourself, return to quiet paleo, and regroup. If transitioning to a ketogenic diet feels psychologically rough, that is not your fault. It usually just means that you and your healthcare providers need to adjust your plan to make it more comfortable for you. This may involve the temporary use of supplements or even medications, changes to the diet to ease you more gradually into ketosis, or troubleshooting your electrolyte plan. Mind your minerals. High insulin levels tell your body to retain water and salt, which causes water weight gain and can lead to swelling in the lower legs, along with a general sense of heaviness and bloat. As insulin levels fall on a ketogenic diet, that excess sodium and water is flushed from the kidneys. This is a healthy change. But if your insulin levels fall too fast, your sodium levels may also fall too fast. If this happens, your adrenal glands, which sit on top of your kidneys, will perceive it as an emergency and tell your kidneys to hold on to more sodium so you won't lose too much too fast. However, the only way your kidneys can do that is by letting go of some potassium instead. This is why it is so important to take in extra sodium and potassium when you are adapting to a ketogenic diet. Drink plenty of water and supplement electrolytes throughout the day. Do not overlook this piece of your plan, as you could become dehydrated or develop mineral imbalances. Symptoms of mild mineral imbalances include lightheadedness, headache, difficulty concentrating, constipation, and leg cramps. Symptoms of more severe mineral deficiencies include palpitations and low blood pressure, which could cause loss of consciousness. Salt your food generously and sip something salty throughout the day, like bone broth or a pre-mixed electrolyte supplement. A clean brand is LMNT, raw unflavored, which contains no sweeteners. If you do experience symptoms of possible mineral imbalances, take some additional electrolytes and you'll usually feel better within a few minutes. If electrolytes don't help, there's a chance your symptoms could be due to hypoglycemia, so test your blood glucose. If it's below 55 milligrams per deciliter, take 1 tablespoon of fruit juice immediately and retest 15 minutes later. If it's between 55 and 70 milligrams per deciliter, only treat with juice if you have symptoms such as nausea, shaking, sweating, dizziness, racing heart, confusion, extreme sleepiness, or poor coordination. You'll find a recipe for a very inexpensive homemade electrolyte solution in your accompanying PDF. Note, If you have heart disease, high blood pressure, or kidney disease, consult with your healthcare team about electrolyte replacement. Estimated electrolyte requirements during keto adaptation. Sodium. 5 grams, or 5,000 milligrams, of sodium per day, roughly 2.5 teaspoons of sea salt. Potassium. 4 grams, or 4,000 milligrams, of potassium per day. It's easiest to obtain potassium from food and from salt substitutes made with potassium chloride. Magnesium. Approximately 400 milligrams per day. Try magnesium glycinate 200 milligrams twice a day, or slow magnesium muscle and heart formulation 2 to 3 tablets per day. Once your biology finds its new equilibrium, you may not need to continue electrolyte replacement. What to expect? Most keto flu symptoms resolve within the first week or two, but some symptoms can linger, especially low energy. Be patient. Adaptation symptoms usually resolve by week 6. In terms of seeing changes and improvement to your mental health, the first 3 days are the hardest. Some people experience substantial benefits by day 4. Most notice significant improvement by week 3. If you don't feel better after 6 weeks, you can troubleshoot, try a different approach, or consult a specialist. If you feel only partially better after 6 weeks, and you don't want to try quiet carnivore, I recommend continuing quiet keto for an additional 6 weeks to give your system more time to respond to the diet. Medication management. Starting a ketogenic diet while taking psychiatric medication can feel more challenging than it otherwise would be, because some medications can raise glucose levels, raise insulin levels, and/or cause insulin resistance, making it harder to achieve ketosis. Shifting into ketosis can affect the blood levels of some medications. Combining certain medications with the ketogenic diet can increase the risk for specific medical problems such as kidney stones. Once the diet takes effect, many medications can begin to feel too strong and cause potentially serious side effects as early as week 3. Quite a few non-psychiatric medications can also raise glucose levels or cause insulin resistance and make it more difficult to achieve ketosis, including prednisone, cholesterol-lowering statin drugs, and most liquid medications, because most of them contain sugar. As yet, there are no published guides to managing psychiatric medications on a ketogenic diet. This is partly because the field is still so new that we don't yet have enough collective experience to produce a care consensus guideline, and partly because managing psychiatric medications is complicated under all circumstances, not just in the context of ketogenic diets. Complete coverage of medication management is beyond the scope of this audiobook, so please consult Appendix B in your accompanying PDF for additional resources. Some may look at all these special considerations and conclude that the ketogenic diet is too extreme or dangerous to be good for people with mental health issues. But most challenges that arise have to do with medications and pre-existing medical conditions, not the diet itself. Remember, medications are designed to interfere with normal biology. Your normal biology is evolutionarily designed to shift back and forth between a glucose-based metabolic state and a fat-based metabolic state. It's the medications that can get in the way of that happening as it should. Depending on the medications you take, it could take longer to experience good appetite control or see satisfying ketone levels show up on your meter. But it is well worth the time and effort to make it to the other side. Once you're in ketosis and you've given your chemistry a few weeks to settle down, 9 times out of 10, you'll be glad you stuck with it. I hope you can appreciate the complexity of this issue and why it's so important not to go on this journey alone, especially if you take prescription medications. Even if you enter ketosis easily, sail through keto adaptation, feel better on a ketogenic diet, and your medications haven't caused you any problems along the way, you will still need medical supervision if you want to try reducing the amount of medication you take. Please do not change your medication plan without professional guidance and never stop any psychiatric medication abruptly. The vast majority of psychiatric medications must be tapered down slowly and carefully to minimize the risk of withdrawal symptoms. These can range from uncomfortable symptoms such as dizziness and electric shock sensations to life-threatening symptoms such as agitated depression or seizures, depending on the medication. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to tapering, so please consult with your prescribing clinician as needed. The ketogenic diet doesn't help everyone reduce or eliminate their psychiatric medication. You and your psychiatrist or nurse practitioner will need to discover what's possible for you. However, even if quiet keto doesn't help you get off psychiatric medication, it could help you feel better on psychiatric medication by counteracting common side effects such as weight gain, sleepiness, and high blood sugar that reduce quality and length of life. If you have found certain psychiatric medications beneficial but don't like how they make you feel, the ketogenic diet could be a very healthy addition to your medication plan. Exogenous ketones, MCT oil, and coconut oil. If you're having a difficult time getting through keto adaptation, the temporary use of supplements that support higher ketone levels may help. One option is to consume oils that your liver converts rapidly into beta-hydroxybutyrate. The other option is to take a ketone supplement that contains actual beta-hydroxybutyrate. MCT oil is purified 100% medium-chain triglycerides. MCT products are industrially refined oils with no taste or odor. Most of the fats found in food are long-chain triglycerides, which take more time to break down into ketones. Because MCTs are shorter in length, the liver can turn them into ketones much faster, supporting slightly higher blood ketone levels for several hours. Look for MCT oils containing high amounts of caprylic acid, also referred to as C8, because caprylic acid raises ketones more effectively than other MCTs. The maximum recommended dosage is about 2 tablespoons 3 times per day, but MCTs can cause digestive upset, so start with 1 teaspoon at a time and try slowly working your way up. MCT powders, which blend easily into beverages without separating, are also available, but these are spray-dried with fillers, so read the label before buying because some contain dairy, soy, or even refined carbohydrates such as maltodextrin and glucose syrup. Coconut oil. About half of the fats in coconut oil are MCTs, but only a small percentage of these are short enough to turn rapidly into ketones, so coconut oil is a very weak ketogenic supplement. I don't include coconut products in my quiet diets because coconuts are technically seeds and therefore can be problematic for some people. However, if coconut oil doesn't bother you, you could try adding some unrefined coconut oil to your ketogenic diet. The main benefits of coconut oil are that it is rich in saturated fat, which is very satisfying, has a pleasant taste, and is stable at cooking temperatures of up to 350 degrees Fahrenheit. Ketone salts are beta-hydroxybutyrate molecules bound to salts like sodium or calcium. They are pricey, and each dose lasts less than 2 hours in the bloodstream, making them too expensive for most people to take regularly. They don't taste good, so most brands are sweetened and many also contain caffeine. The market is flooded with choices, some of which are of poor quality, so read labels carefully to make sure they contain a decent amount of BHB. Better brands typically contain about 12 grams of BHB per dose. Measure your ketone level before you take them and 45 minutes later to make sure they're worth your money. All brands are high in sodium, so you do not need to supplement sodium when ketone salts are in your system. Ketone esters are pure liquid beta-hydroxybutyrate in a bottle. These chemicals are very expensive because they're costly to isolate, and they taste perfectly awful. They do raise ketones substantially, sometimes by as much as 3.0 millimolar. But, like ketone salts, their time in the bloodstream is short. They also spike ketones so effectively that your body may stop making its own ketones for the rest of the day. Despite these limitations, they can be useful for those who can't follow a ketogenic diet, but who need the benefits of ketosis, such as people with cognitive impairment who can't manage or won't follow a ketogenic diet, and people who don't have much control over their food choices, such as people living in group homes, residential care facilities, or other institutional settings. I don't generally recommend long-term use of ketone or MCT oil supplements to those following a ketogenic diet because they're expensive, industrially refined products that don't last long in your system, and they're usually unnecessary. If you're following a well-formulated ketogenic diet, your body will naturally produce all the ketones you need around the clock for free. No supplement can prevent high glucose and insulin levels. Only diet can do that. Troubleshooting ketone levels. Difficulty achieving or maintaining sufficient ketone levels is the most common reason for poor results. People often consult with me and tell me that the ketogenic diet didn't work for them, or that it made their mental health condition worse. In almost every case, it turned out that they either weren't in ketosis consistently enough, or that they had stopped the diet after just a few days because they didn't like how they felt on it. I'll tell you what I tell them. If you haven't tried being in ketosis consistently for at least 6 weeks, you haven't tried it yet, so you don't yet know what might be possible for you. Ketones too low? If your ketones tend to hover well below 1.0 millimolar, look for common culprits such as hidden carbohydrates, insulin spiking ingredients like sweeteners and protein powders, both of which are discouraged on quiet keto, overeating, or medications that raise glucose and/or insulin levels. Remember that it is the quantity of protein plus the quantity of carbohydrate in your diet that largely determines how high your insulin levels rise after eating. And the higher your insulin, the lower your ketones. If your ketones are too low, try lowering carbohydrate first by limiting your carbohydrate to 20 total grams per day. Reduce protein only if other strategies haven't helped, and do not go below 0.4 grams of protein per pound of ideal body weight. Stress, sleep deprivation, injury, illness, and certain medications can also lower ketone levels. Ketones too high? If your ketones run above 3.0 millimolar most of the time and it feels uncomfortable, or you're losing weight quickly, you probably need more food. Common symptoms include insomnia, cravings, agitation, and feeling scattered. Try adding more protein to your plan first before you consider adding more carbohydrate. Ketones all over the place? It's perfectly normal for ketones to fluctuate throughout the day and night, but the goal is to keep them between 1.0 millimolar and 3.0 millimolar most of the time. If you're repeatedly going in and out of ketosis, it will be hard for your metabolism to shift gears and adapt to burning fat for energy. This state of metabolic purgatory is what I call no man's land. This situation can be frustrating and even physically and psychologically uncomfortable, because it can trap you in the keto adaptation phase indefinitely. Track your trends using a calendar and give yourself a star for every day that your ketones reach at least 1.0 millimolar. Aim to string together a full 6 weeks of daily stars. If you're going in and out of ketosis, start keeping a food and exercise journal to see if you can figure out what the problem is. If your ketones run low a few times during that 6-week stretch, it's probably fine. But the more consistent you can be, the sooner your metabolism will make the shift to fat-burning mode, which is when people tend to notice major benefits. Once you've shifted solidly into that state, cravings for carbohydrates tend to quiet down or even disappear. What if ketosis gets interrupted? If you intentionally or accidentally fall out of ketosis, your mental health symptoms could return rather quickly, sometimes within as little as 24 hours, just as if you had abruptly stopped a psychiatric medication. Work with your mental health care professionals before starting the diet to create a personalized plan B for such situations, especially if you're using the ketogenic diet to treat severe psychiatric symptoms. In these cases, you may want to have a fast-acting medication on hand for temporary emergency use, or a crisis support plan in place to keep yourself safe until you're back in ketosis. Being fat-adapted is a precious and sometimes hard-earned metabolic state. The longer you are out of ketosis, the more likely it is that you will have to go through keto adaptation all over again. So it is in your best interest to find your way back to ketosis as soon as possible. Should ketosis interruptus occur for any reason, the following simple strategies are designed to reduce your glucose and insulin levels as efficiently as possible to jumpstart the fat-burning process. If you've been out of ketosis for more than a week, or if these strategies cause significant emotional or physical discomfort, return to quiet paleo for at least a week before trying any of these again. Fasting jumpstart, plus or minus ketone support. Fast until your ketones rise to at least 1.0 millimolar. Be sure to consume broth and or electrolyte supplements, and drink plenty of water and or unsweetened seltzer. You can supplement with exogenous ketones or add a little MCT oil to your broth if it makes fasting more comfortable or tolerable for you. High-fat whole foods jumpstart, plus or minus intermittent fasting. Eat only from the foods on the following list until you're satisfied. Eggs cooked in fat. No dairy, please. Pork belly, pork butt, baby back ribs, or bacon if you tolerate it well. Lamb belly, lamb ribs. Oily fish, such as sardines, mackerel, fatty salmon, eel, herring, or sable. Avocados, maximum 1 per day. Broth and water. These foods are naturally ketogenic and satisfying because they all have a high fat to protein ratio and little to no carbohydrate, so you don't have to count or weigh anything. If your ketones haven't risen to at least 1.0 millimolar by day 5, stick to the same food list, but narrow your eating window by eating only once or twice a day and fasting overnight for 14 to 16 hours. Exercise boost. Exercise reduces liver glycogen levels, shortening the time it takes to start burning fat. If you've had a higher carbohydrate day and want to get back on track the very next day, do some high-intensity exercise that night and or the next morning, and you'll turn the corner sooner. Beyond 6 weeks. The plans in this book are intended as short-term discovery strategies of 6 to 12 weeks to start you on the path to better metabolic health and better mental health. You and your clinicians can then use what you've learned to design your own personalized dietary roadmap going forward. If quiet keto works well to control your mental health symptoms, which would be wonderful, you can continue the plan as is. But if you long for a more diverse diet, you can try carefully expanding your food list as described in Chapter 16 to include cured meats, nuts, and/or a greater variety of low-carbohydrate vegetables and seasonings. The majority of my patients who improve on a ketogenic diet do report a return of their psychiatric symptoms if they stop the diet. However, a small number of people seem to experience enough healing after being on a ketogenic diet for a year or two that they can increase the amount of carbohydrate in their diet without their original psychiatric symptoms recurring. This scenario may be more likely if you are young, metabolically healthy, physically fit, or have milder mental health concerns. The safest way to test the waters is to slowly increase your daily carbohydrate allowance from fruits and vegetables while monitoring your glucose levels and your mental health symptoms to see how much carbohydrate is safe for you. If you'd like to continue on a ketogenic diet long term, rest assured, all available evidence supports the idea that a well-formulated whole foods ketogenic diet that provides all essential nutrients and keeps your ketones in a moderate range should be safe long term. And there is no biological reason to think otherwise. Dramatic headlines warning that ketogenic diets may improve your health now but will endanger your health later all come from nutrition epidemiology and are therefore baseless. The other common criticism is that there are no long-term studies of ketogenic diets, so it's risky to follow them for extended periods of time. Proving beyond a reasonable doubt that any dietary pattern is guaranteed safe for everyone to follow for the rest of their lives is impossible. So no dietary pattern can promise you this. Just as you would with any diet, continue with routine medical checkups and let your progress be your guide. However, given everything we know about human metabolism, nutrition, and chronic disease, controlling blood sugar and insulin levels may be the single most powerful thing you can do to improve and protect your mental and physical health in the long run. And the ketogenic diet is a very effective way to accomplish this. Chapter 19. Quiet Carnivore. If quiet paleo or quiet keto didn't bring you the benefits you'd hoped for, you may benefit from a carnivore diet, at least as a short-term experiment. As mentioned in Chapter 16, carnivore diets include a range of eating patterns, from plant-free all-meat diets to mostly meat diets that include dairy, eggs, spices, alcohol, and sometimes even honey, because it's produced by bees and is therefore an animal product. At first glance, carnivore diets may seem extreme, irrational, and dangerous. However, when we look objectively at the biological differences between plant and animal foods, it becomes easier to appreciate the potential health benefits of these unorthodox ways of eating. Why carnivore? Plant-free diets efficiently eliminate multiple culprits all at once: grains, legumes, sugar, starch, fiber, all plant toxins, and nearly all anti-nutrients. Eggs and dairy contain a few anti-nutrients as mentioned in Chapter 11. Plants are hard on the body, so excluding all plant foods, at least for a while, may offer unique therapeutic advantages, particularly for those of us with compromised defenses who have lost the ability to safely and comfortably tolerate a wide variety of plant foods. I have found carnivore diets to be indispensable discovery tools in my clinical practice, not only for identifying food sensitivities, but for resolving chronic constipation and IBS symptoms, quieting food addiction and binge eating, and breaking weight loss plateaus. The simplicity of carnivore diets is also wonderful for people who want to get into ketosis, but feel too depressed or overwhelmed to memorize food lists, follow rules, or count carbohydrates. The theory behind the carnivore approach is that a diet consisting exclusively of animal foods is the healthiest, safest, and most nutritious diet we can eat. Those who advocate for carnivore diets view plant foods as unnecessary, nutritionally inferior, and potentially harmful to human health. It's not possible to say with any scientific certainty whether this dietary pattern, or any dietary pattern for that matter, is ideal for everyone. But my clinical and personal experience tells me that a well-formulated carnivore diet can be uniquely healing for some of us. The history and science of carnivore diets. Historical accounts exist of people eating mostly meat or all meat diets for long stretches of time without incident, including the Inuit hunters living in the Canadian Arctic, where plant foods are scarce. As Gary Taubes writes in his superb book, Good Calories, Bad Calories, the Inuit paid little attention to the plants in their environment because they added nothing to their food supply, noted the Canadian anthropologist Diamond Jennis, who spent the years 1914 to 1916 living in the Coronation Gulf region of Canada's Arctic coast. Jennis described their typical diet during one 3-month stretch as no fruit, no vegetables, morning and night, nothing but seal meat washed down with ice-cold water or hot broth. The ability to thrive on such a vegetable and fruit-free diet was also noted by the lawyer and abolitionist Richard Henry Dana Jr. in his 1840 Memoirs of Life on a Sailing Ship, 2 years before the mast. For 16 months, Dana wrote, we lived upon almost nothing but fresh beef. Fried beefsteaks 3 times a day, in perfect health, and without ailings and failings. Modern carnivore diets are such a new concept that no rigorous clinical trials yet exist exploring their effects on human health. But curious scientists are beginning to dip their toes into the water. In 2021, a social media survey conducted by Dr. Belinda Lennertz and colleagues at Boston Children's Hospital of more than 2,000 adults who reported having followed a carnivore diet for at least 6 months found that 95% were satisfied both with the diet itself as well as with its health benefits. With respect to mental health in particular, the majority reported improvements in food cravings, 91%, energy, 89%, mental clarity, 85%, focus, 83%, and sleep, 69%. Of the 479 people with psychiatric concerns, 48% reported complete resolution of symptoms, 48% reported improvement in symptoms, and only 4% reported that the diet had had no effect. While these trends are encouraging, keep in mind that this information comes entirely from volunteer responses. No concrete data, such as blood tests, vital signs, or formal psychiatric evaluations, were collected. Also, the survey likely attracted people who were doing well on the diet and were therefore positively biased toward it, because only those who had been on the diet for at least 6 months were eligible to participate. Internal medicine physician Dr. Csaba Tóth and neurobiologist Dr. Zsófia Clemens direct the International Center for Medical Nutritional Intervention in Hungary, where they prescribe all-meat diets to people with advanced, treatment-resistant medical conditions, such as cancer and autoimmune diseases. Their protocol begins with a diet exclusively of meat and fat from 4-legged animals only, that can later be expanded as tolerated to a Paleolithic ketogenic diet, a meat-based plan that allows select plant foods. Their view is that chronic diseases stem largely from increased intestinal permeability, leaky gut, which can be healed with their signature carnivore plan. They have published several interesting case reports, including cases of type 1 diabetes, an autoimmune disease that eventually destroys the ability of the pancreas to produce insulin, in which insulin production capacity was preserved, preventing the need for insulin injections, and multiple cases of cancer in which tumor growth was halted for 2 years or more without the use of radiation or chemotherapy. Do plant-free diets contain enough nutrients? Most nutrients are more abundant and more bioavailable in animal foods than plant foods, but there are important exceptions. In an article published in the journal Current Opinion in Endocrinology, Diabetes, and Obesity, nutrition science writer and carnivore diet expert Amber O'Hearn addresses the question of whether a plant-free diet can meet our daily requirements for all essential nutrients. She begins by explaining that nutrient requirements are context-dependent, meaning they vary depending on what we eat. And since standard recommendations regarding vitamin and mineral intake were determined in the context of a typical, relatively high carbohydrate diet, the same rules do not apply. Nevertheless, she concludes that it is possible to meet standard nutrient requirements without eating plants, but that you may need to include specific animal foods to do so. Most importantly, liver. Liver is a rich source of vitamin A, which we associate with orange vegetables like carrots, and folate, vitamin B9, which we associate with leafy greens. Although the word folate comes from the Latin folium, which means leaf, ounce for ounce, liver is richer in folate than spinach, considered one of the best plant sources of folate. Just take care not to overcook liver, as folate is easily destroyed by heat. When we think of vitamin C, we think of citrus fruits, not meat. If you recall from Chapter 3, it was citrus that rescued sailors from the ravages of scurvy. However, O'Hearn points out that it's been known for centuries that fresh meat alone can cure scurvy too, suggesting that the small amounts of vitamin C present in animal foods appear to be sufficient for our needs. Like folate, vitamin C is sensitive to heat, so be sure not to overcook your food. You may want to include occasional raw choices such as sashimi, tuna tartare, or beef tartare. If you're worried you're not getting enough vitamin C, add a squeeze of fresh lemon or lime juice to your water or seltzer if you tolerate it, or take a supplement. As for calcium, it's unclear whether you can meet your requirements unless you include dairy or certain kinds of seafood in your diet. If you don't eat dairy, which I recommend you avoid, shrimp are a good source of calcium, as are small, soft-boned fish, such as sardines, anchovies, and mackerel. If you're allergic to seafood or want to take a calcium supplement, be sure to choose one that contains vitamin D3 and vitamin K2, and ideally magnesium as well, if you tolerate magnesium supplements, as these nutrients help your body absorb and utilize calcium properly. The plans in this audiobook are intended as short-term discovery strategies, so if you would like to follow a carnivore diet long-term, please work with a healthcare professional to periodically monitor your nutrient status and your overall health to see if changes need to be made along the way. To be on the safe side, obtain a few nutrient blood tests prior to starting your carnivore diet to establish your baseline levels, and then have them rechecked 3 months later. The nutrients most worth monitoring on a carnivore diet are vitamin A, best carnivore sources are liver and fatty fish, vitamin C, rare meats, folate, gently cooked liver, vitamin E, salmon, trout, goose, and vitamin D, sunshine and animal fats. Unfortunately, there are no good tests for vitamin K2 or calcium deficiency. The quiet carnivore diet. Quiet carnivore is a ketogenic diet, so please follow quiet paleo for at least 2 weeks before starting quiet carnivore, just as you would before embarking on any other ketogenic diet. Listen to Chapter 18 carefully before considering quiet carnivore to be sure a ketogenic diet is right for you. If you want to transition directly from quiet paleo to quiet carnivore without following quiet keto in between, that's perfectly fine, but you'll need to take all of the same preparatory steps and precautions outlined in Chapter 18 to ensure a smooth transition into ketosis. The quiet carnivore diet grew out of my study of nutrition science and my experiences with patients who were struggling with food sensitivities and other health issues despite following other versions of a carnivore diet. The quiet carnivore food list consists primarily of fresh or fresh frozen, unprocessed meat, poultry, fish, shellfish, organ meats, bone broth, salt, and water or seltzer. Simplifying your diet to this degree allows you to start with a relatively clean slate, which will help you determine if your mental or physical health symptoms may be rooted in food intolerances. Quiet carnivore excludes dairy and eggs and minimizes processed animal foods that have been aged, cured, smoked, preserved, or fermented. Examples of products to limit include bacon, dry aged beef, smoked salmon, hot dogs, jerky, ham, salami, and cold cuts. Like all quiet diets, quiet carnivore eliminates dairy because it is such a common cause of inflammation, digestive problems, elevated insulin levels, increased appetite, and weight gain. Quiet carnivore eliminates eggs because, despite the egg being a nearly perfect food, eggs are also a common cause of allergies and food sensitivities. Both eggs and dairy are on the Food and Drug Administration's list of the so-called Big 9 most common food allergies, and both can cause non-allergic sensitivity reactions in susceptible individuals as well. Food sensitivities and mental health. A case example. Lisa is a nurse practitioner in her early 60s who had lived with frequent debilitating panic attacks since the age of 17. In her 20s and 30s, she ate a vegetarian diet that included eggs and dairy products. But as she approached her 40s, her anxiety began to worsen. So she tried reintroducing meat, but it did not alleviate her symptoms. She tried talk therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, and EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing, as well as a variety of medications meant to treat depression and anxiety, including Celexa, Lexapro, Cymbalta, Prozac, Wellbutrin, and Zoloft. Talk therapy provided minimal support, and the medications either didn't help or caused intolerable side effects. The one medication that brought any significant relief was Klonopin, or clonazepam, which she'd been taking for 15 years by the time we started working together. Her health was also slowly deteriorating, and she had been diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome a few years after beginning the Klonopin. One day, she was running late for an appointment and grabbed a hard-boiled egg to eat in the car on the way, having no time to eat or drink anything else, not even her usual cup of coffee. Within minutes, she had a full-blown panic attack. Through trial and error, she eventually figured out that eggs, specifically egg whites, were predictably causing every single one of her panic attacks. This despite 2 rounds of allergy testing that revealed no food allergies. She told me, "When I think of the thousands of dollars I spent talking to therapists about my childhood, only to realize that my panic attacks were caused by eggs, I really want to scream." I've now been free from daily Klonopin use for over a year, and my physical and mental health have improved more than I ever thought possible. The Klonopin I'd needed to alleviate the panic attacks that were caused by the undiagnosed egg sensitivity eventually worsened my mental health by creating dependence with interdose withdrawals, and probably created most of my chronic fatigue syndrome symptoms. Histamine intolerance. Freshness matters. Like all quiet diets, quiet carnivore emphasizes fresh animal foods because aged, cured, and processed animal foods are high in histamine, a neurotransmitter that can cross into your bloodstream, attach to histamine receptors throughout your body, and cause any number of unpleasant symptoms. From the moment a plant or animal dies, bacteria naturally present in the environment begin breaking down its proteins into histamine and other biogenic amines, protein fragments with biological activity. Histamine, and other amines which we won't cover here, will continue to accumulate in food until you freeze it, boil it, or eat it. So the more aged foods are, the more histamine they will contain. Furthermore, we humans intentionally add bacteria to fresh foods to ferment them, or cure them with salt to create products with longer shelf lives and more intense flavor profiles. We ferment milk to make cheese. We cure pork until it becomes bacon. We smoke salmon to make lox. We hang beef for months while a thick coat of bacteria breaks down its proteins to produce aged ribeye steaks. All of these gourmet foods can be extremely high in histamine. The healthy intestine makes an enzyme that neutralizes histamine, so most people can tolerate reasonable quantities of high histamine foods. However, if you have gut damage, take certain medications, including NSAIDs like ibuprofen, drink alcohol, are under extreme stress, or are deficient in vitamin B6, vitamin C, copper, or zinc, your ability to neutralize histamine can be weakened, allowing histamine to breach your gut lining and run amok. This condition is called histamine intolerance, and it is fairly common, particularly in middle-aged women. Histamine binds to 4 different receptors across 8 different organ systems, so if a significant amount of histamine enters your circulation, it can cause a staggering variety of unpredictable symptoms throughout the body, including migraines, daytime sleepiness, hives, stomach pain, uterine cramps, wheezing, palpitations, insomnia, itching, facial flushing, ankle swelling, racing or pounding heart, and blood pressure fluctuations. Unfortunately, there are no simple diagnostic tests for histamine intolerance. So if you suspect you may be dealing with this issue, the first step is to try a low histamine diet. All 3 quiet diets are low in histamine. Because animal foods contain more protein than plant foods, they tend to accumulate more histamine as they age. But there are a few fresh plant foods that are naturally high in histamine, or that stimulate our bodies to release histamine, such as avocado, spinach, and strawberries. The best way to reduce your histamine exposure is to buy the freshest meat, seafood, and poultry that you can find. This isn't always easy, especially in the case of beef, because it is standard practice to age beef for several weeks to tenderize its fibers before it is distributed to grocery stores and butcher shops. You'll find additional tips for managing histamine intolerance in your accompanying PDF. Quiet carnivore macros. Protein requirements may not be any higher on carnivore diets, but many people can eat more protein than on a standard ketogenic diet and still maintain therapeutic ketone levels. So instead of starting with 0.6 grams of protein per pound ideal body weight per day, start at about 0.8 grams of protein per pound ideal body weight. For example, if your ideal body weight is 120 pounds, start with about 100 grams of protein per day. For reference, 1 pound of raw, 80% lean ground beef contains about 80 grams of protein. So, if you were eating only ground beef, you'd need about 1.25 pounds, or 20 ounces per day, to meet your protein requirement. Carnivore diets contain no visible carbohydrate, so your ketone control knob on carnivore won't be protein plus carbohydrate. It will be protein alone. As protein intake goes up, so does your insulin level, bringing ketones down. If your ketones are too low or you're not feeling well, try adding more fat to your meals. If your ketones are too high, increase your protein intake to 1.0 or 1.2 grams per pound ideal body weight. If your ketones are running low and you're not experiencing the mental health benefits you were hoping for, you may want to try lowering your protein intake to 0.7 or 0.6 grams per pound ideal body weight. Fat requirements, as always, should be tailored to your energy, calorie requirements, but you should aim for a fat-to-protein ratio of at least 1:1, meaning at least 1 gram of fat for every gram of protein. For example, if your ideal body weight is 120 pounds, you'd start with 100 grams of protein per day, plus at least 100 grams of fat per day. That same 1.25 pounds of ground beef in the example earlier contains about 115 grams of fat. Some people have better results when they aim for a slightly higher fat-to-protein ratio of 1.5:1, as this is more ketogenic. And Doctors Tote and Clemens recommend an even higher fat-to-protein ratio of 2:1. So, experiment with different ratios to see what feels right to you. To achieve higher fat-to-protein ratios, you usually need to add some animal fat to the cuts of meat typically found in most grocery stores, as much of the visible fat has been trimmed to suit modern consumer tastes. It's difficult to estimate the amount of protein and fat in various animal foods because the fat-to-protein ratio varies depending on the cut of meat, how much fat was trimmed at the butcher, how it is cooked, and even what the animal was fed. However, most cuts of red meat with visible fat contain at least a 1:1 ratio of fat to protein. So either keep very lean meats such as white meat, poultry, shrimp, and pork loin to a minimum, or add plenty of fat to them. If you have access to a good local butcher shop, ask if you can special order fattier cuts of meat or higher fat ground meat. If you don't have a good butcher shop that stocks local pastured meats from humanely raised animals, consider purchasing shares of fresh or frozen meat from a local or online meat CSA, Community Supported Agriculture Program. Within a few weeks, as your metabolism adapts to a ketogenic carnivore diet, your appetite will become more reliable. You'll get a feel for how much protein and fat you need, and your eating plan will become more instinctive. Many women settle in at between 1 and 1.5 pounds of meat, seafood, and/or poultry per day, and many men settle in at between 1.5 and 2 pounds per day. But let your appetite be your guide. You'll find a quiet carnivore food list in your accompanying PDF. Carnivore challenges. All special diets pose social challenges, but carnivore diets can be particularly difficult. When you eat only meat, you require larger portions of meat per meal, which may mean ordering 2 or 3 entrees at restaurants, which can be expensive, or asking for extra helpings when eating at friends' homes, which can be expensive for them and awkward for you. If you're being diligent, you'll also need to request that no seasonings, sauces, or marinades are used. Some people find the carnivore diet boring, and quiet carnivore can be particularly challenging in this regard because it omits dairy and eggs, which are such versatile and convenient animal foods. However, many are surprised at how satisfying the diet is and how much they enjoy eating this way. You'll have to experience it for yourself to see what you think. If you follow a strict carnivore diet for long enough and you stray from your plan, you may experience exaggerated food reactions, perhaps because the enzyme systems your body uses to process plant toxins have basically gone to sleep, or because your microbiome has changed in response to your carnivore diet and needs time to readjust. If this happens to you, you may want to consider including very small quantities of plant foods from my Quiet Diet food list such as herbs, berries, or fruit-based tea in your carnivore diet to keep your system on its toes. This carnivore-ish approach is easier to maintain long-term, but may result in fewer benefits for some individuals. Beyond 6 weeks. If after 4 to 6 weeks on quiet carnivore you're happy with how you feel, you may decide to continue longer term with quiet carnivore, or try expanding your diet one food group at a time to see where your safe outer limit lies. Refer back to Chapter 16. If even a quiet carnivore diet doesn't agree with you, it may be that certain animal foods don't agree with you. Perhaps you don't tolerate seafood well. Like eggs and dairy, fish and shellfish are also among the big 9 common allergy and sensitivity culprits, in which case it's worth excluding it for a week as an experiment. To make matters more complicated, the animal foods we eat now aren't what they used to be. Like us, animals have been burdened with pesticides, heavy metals, antibiotics, environmental pollutants, stress, lack of sun, improper diet, and unnatural diets based on grains and vegetable oils. Sadly, the fat in most pork and chicken sold in the United States is very high in linoleic acid. For this reason, I advise using tallow or duck fat rather than lard or schmaltz, chicken fat, as your go-to animal fats. Do your best to find and advocate for animal foods and fats sourced from healthy, humanely raised animals that are fed a species-appropriate diet. If quiet paleo, quiet keto, and quiet carnivore don't help you, your symptoms may be unrelated to your diet, in which case you may want to consider consulting with a psychiatrist who specializes in functional medicine or integrative psychiatry to explore other potential root causes of mental health conditions. Chapter 20. You can do it. Practical tips and frequently asked questions. Scientific understanding is all well and good, but changing the way we eat is hard, so this chapter is here to make it a little easier. If you're worried that quiet diet protocols seem too restrictive to manage long-term, remember that all you're doing right now is conducting an experiment of at least 6 weeks to gather information about how food affects your mental health. It's too early to know where it might take you. Regardless of whether you ultimately decide to follow some version of a quiet diet long-term, I would still encourage you to take bold action on behalf of your mental health by replacing any harmful products that may be in your kitchen with healthy whole foods. Detoxify your kitchen. Remove from your home sugar, vegetable oils, dairy products, cereals, grains, legumes, processed foods, alcohol, flours, and any products made with vegetable oils or refined carbohydrates, such as sauces, dressings, marinades, and mayonnaise, as these items are unhealthy for everyone. Restock your home for health and happiness with fresh and frozen meat, seafood, and/or poultry, eggs, fresh or frozen fruits and vegetables. Consult the Quiet Diet food lists. Tuna, salmon, and other types of fish in cans, jars, or pouches. Careful if you have histamine intolerance. Herbs, seasonings, natural extracts, tart vinegars, and flavored salts. Consult the Quiet Diet food list. Extra virgin, unrefined, cold-pressed fruit oils. Olive oil, avocado oil, or palm fruit oil. Non-dairy animal fats, such as duck fat and tallow. Tallow is the rendered fat from beef, lamb, or sheep. Firebrand Meats offers lard that is lower in linoleic acid than commercially available lard in the United States. Seltzer and herbal teas made from kinder, gentler ingredients such as fruits rather than pungent spices. Tip: if you live with people who eat differently, store your food in separate areas of the refrigerator and pantry and consider asking them to keep items that are most tempting to you out of sight. Meal timing and intermittent fasting. As described in Chapter 5, taking frequent, prolonged breaks from food processing switches your metabolism into fat-burning mode, allowing essential maintenance and healing to take place. Intermittent fasting is a powerful clinical tool. But when working with the short-term discovery strategies in this audiobook, I would advise you to focus on your food plan first, because it's easier and more comfortable to eat less frequently after your glucose and insulin levels have quieted down. This is especially true following the keto adaptation phase of a ketogenic or carnivore diet, because keto adaptation trains your cells to easily access fat for energy between meals. People following standard high carbohydrate diets often get hunger pangs when attempting intermittent fasting, but these tend not to occur if you're already fat adapted. If your meal timing doesn't correct itself within a few weeks, or you're looking for ways to augment your efforts, you can then introduce meal timing techniques such as fasting for 14 to 16 hours every night by not eating after dinner and delaying your breakfast by 2 hours. If you incorporate intermittent fasting into your metabolic plan, remember to stay well hydrated and supplement with electrolytes as needed. Simple intermittent fasting methods like this can help you in a variety of ways. Fasting is the ultimate elimination diet. If your mental health symptoms improve during fasting windows, it strongly suggests that your condition is rooted in problems with food choices and/or metabolism, which would be a very hopeful and empowering discovery. For example, if you tend to wake up in a good mood in the morning, but your mood deteriorates over the course of the day, it may be a sign that your food plan is making you depressed. Fasting drops insulin like a stone. Everything we eat raises insulin to some extent, so nothing lowers insulin more effectively than not eating at all. If you stray from your healthy eating plan and need to get your glucose and insulin levels back under control, fasting is the most efficient way to accomplish this. This is another reason why I recommend cleaning up your diet first. Switching back and forth between a high carbohydrate, high insulin diet and fasting can cause dramatic ups and downs in your glucose and insulin levels that can be physically and psychologically uncomfortable. Fasting is much easier on a low insulin quiet diet. Fasting is ketogenic. If you're having trouble achieving good blood sugar or insulin control with dietary strategies alone, combining intermittent fasting with quiet paleo, quiet keto, or quiet carnivore is a powerful way to multiply your efforts. If you prefer not to follow a ketogenic diet, intermittent fasting may allow you to reap some of the metabolic benefits of ketosis without having to restrict your carbohydrate intake. Fasting fosters mindfulness. If the idea of not eating between meals or going for 14 hours without food makes you anxious, observe your physical and psychological reactions without judgment as you practice these simple fasting techniques. Reassure yourself that it is perfectly safe to go without food for 14 hours, even if it feels strange or uncomfortable. Exercises like this deepen your understanding of your relationship with food. Note: please do not use fasting methods if you are underweight, have a history of anorexia or restrictive eating, or if you are pregnant or breastfeeding. Please do not fast for more than 16 hours without consulting with a healthcare professional first. For more information about intermittent fasting, I recommend the work of fasting expert Dr. Jason Fung. What about snacking? Quiet diets don't include snacks because it's important to practice giving your body a break from food processing in between meals. However, it's normal to be hungry between meals when you're first transitioning to a ketogenic diet. So if you want to quell that feeling, it's okay to use whole food ketogenic snacks for the first week or two until your appetite quiets down. Ideas include a hard-boiled egg, cucumber or celery sticks with mashed avocado, a scoop of homemade chicken or tuna salad, or a handful of olives. If you're hungry in between meals even after the first couple of weeks, you may need to increase the amount of protein or fat in your meals. What about paleo and keto convenience foods? You will be hard-pressed to find so-called paleo-friendly and keto-friendly products that follow quiet diet principles because the quiet diet consists of fresh, whole foods, not of shelf-stable food products. Most paleo convenience foods contain ingredients that come from whole foods but are actually refined, such as nut flours and coconut sugar. And a growing number of paleo snacks contain brain-risky cassava flour. Many savory meat bars contain nightshade spices such as red pepper. And if you have histamine intolerance, shelf-stable meat products may not agree with you. If you do not have histamine intolerance, look for meat bars, dried sausages, and jerkies that are very low in carbohydrate and without nightshade spices. If you do discover that you tolerate nuts well, they make a very convenient whole food snack, but be careful with nut bars held together with sticky sweet ingredients. Check the label for carbohydrate content and stay within your safe limit. Most so-called keto-friendly products are neither keto nor friendly. These products are all very low in carbohydrate, but that's where the good news ends. Many are made with artificial sweeteners, vegetable oils, nut flours, and refined protein powders, including whey protein powder, which spikes insulin almost as much as pure glucose does. Natural and artificial sweeteners. Honey is a paleo-friendly sweetener because it is all natural and unrefined, but that doesn't mean it's a wise metabolic choice. Some varieties of honey do contain less glucose and more fructose than sugar, so they don't raise glucose levels as much as sugar does. But unfortunately, honey raises insulin levels more than sugar does. If you're following a ketogenic diet, be careful with sweeteners. Sugar substitutes may keep your cravings for sweets alive, making it harder for you to stick to your healthy plan. The better choices are allulose, erythritol, monk fruit, and stevia because they are extracted from natural sources, generally well tolerated, don't raise glucose levels, and have little to no effect on insulin levels. Avoid maltitol, xylitol, and sorbitol. These natural sugar alcohols cause blood sugar and insulin spikes as well as gastrointestinal distress, with maltitol being the worst offender. Avoid artificial sweeteners such as aspartame, ACE-K, or ace-sulfame potassium, saccharin, and Splenda, another sweetener that can raise both glucose and insulin levels. Splenda consists of sucralose mixed with dextrose and maltodextrin, two simple sugars that break down into glucose in the bloodstream. If you decide to include sweeteners on your ketogenic diet, use them sparingly and notice how they affect you. Unfortunately, scientific studies don't tell us what we really want to know about sweeteners: how they affect insulin and appetite levels in people following a ketogenic diet. Test your ketone levels before and 1 hour after drinking a beverage that contains your favorite sweetener. If your ketones drop significantly, the sweetener has probably raised your insulin level and should be avoided. The good news is that interest in sweets usually diminishes substantially on a ketogenic diet, and many people discover an enhanced ability to appreciate the subtle sweetness in foods we don't typically think of as sweet, such as cucumbers, scallops, and broccoli. However, if you find yourself missing sweetness, here are some possibilities. If you're on quiet keto, You could try a small portion of raspberries, blackberries, or strawberries from time to time. On quiet paleo, you can include more liberal amounts of fruit in your plan, so long as your blood sugar stays in a healthy range. After you've completed the quiet diet protocol, if you find there are certain sugar-free treats you tolerate well and that don't trigger you to eat in an unhealthy way, you may decide to incorporate them into your long-term plan, especially if they help you say no to clearly harmful alternatives made with sugar and flour. Choose low-carbohydrate treats with simple ingredients, such as dairy-free dark chocolate sweetened with allulose, monk fruit, stevia, or erythritol, instead of ultra-processed snack bars containing whey protein, soy protein, or artificial sweeteners. Caffeine. Caffeine is a psychoactive substance with complex effects on neurotransmitters, hormones, and metabolism. Caffeine stimulates the release of stress hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, and doses of 250 milligrams or more promote slightly higher glucose levels. It also stimulates glutamate, the brain's gas pedal, and dopamine activity, and suppresses the activity of GABA, the brain's calming neurotransmitter, and adenosine, a sleep-promoting neurotransmitter. These biochemical effects help to explain why caffeine can make you feel positive and alert, but also why it's such a common cause of insomnia and panic attacks. If you consume caffeine in the form of coffee, keep in mind that coffee beans are seeds. If you consume caffeine in the form of tea, be aware that tea contains tannins, which are anti-nutrients. Refer to Chapter 13. It can take 16 to 24 hours for caffeine to completely clear the bloodstream, so even a small quantity first thing in the morning can interfere with quality sleep in sensitive individuals. If you're a slow metabolizer, it can build up in your bloodstream over time and cause chronic anxiety and insomnia that may seem unrelated to the timing of caffeine intake. Caffeine destabilizes your appetite signaling system. It can suppress appetite in the short term, but as it wears off later in the day, rebound hunger can occur. Caffeine frequently leads to tolerance and physical dependence, meaning that you may require higher dosages over time to achieve the same stimulating effect, and that if you stop using it, you could experience withdrawal symptoms such as headaches, depression, fatigue, and difficulty concentrating. If you decide to try a caffeine elimination experiment, which I do recommend, cut back gradually to minimize withdrawal symptoms, and then give yourself at least 30 days to observe how you feel without it. As you transition to a new style of eating, you will encounter challenges and obstacles. So here are some tips to help you navigate your way through these more easily. What about social gatherings? When going to a dinner party, offer to bring a dish to share that is on your plan. Then there will be at least one dish there that you can eat, and your host will feel less pressure to address your dietary needs. If you know the host will be serving a main dish with a sauce or topping you can't eat, ask if they might set aside a plain serving for you. If you're going to a food-oriented public event where there won't be appropriate food, eat something before you go so you'll be less hungry and less tempted. If people ask questions, find a neutral, self-focused way to explain why you're eating differently, such as, "I'm trying an elimination diet experiment to help identify foods that might not agree with me." Phrasing like this keeps your mental and physical health concerns private and implies no judgment of their food choices. What about restaurants? Following quiet diet principles is challenging in restaurants because most use vegetable oils and other low-quality ingredients. Most also pre-season their meat, seafood, and poultry with marinades and rubs, or mix them with fillers and then cover them in sauces. So even if you ask for the simplest dish on the menu and ask for it to be prepared without a sauce, you're very unlikely to be served something without unhealthy ingredients. That's okay. Don't worry about trying to be perfect about your plan in restaurants. or anywhere else for that matter. Just do the best you can. If you can manage to follow quiet diet guidelines even 90% of the time, you're doing great. What about traveling? Consider traveling with an insulated lunch bag and an ice pack. Cooler Shock brand ice packs are ideal because they contain a special gel that stays frozen for several hours and keeps foods ice cold for up to 10 hours. These are TSA friendly when frozen solid, so you can take perishable food with you when flying out of U.S. airports. Try to stay in hotel rooms with refrigerators or, better yet, choose a homestay with its own kitchen. What about cheat days? The more closely you follow the quiet diet protocol, the more clarity you will gain and the more likely it will be that you will experience noticeable benefits. However, once you've completed the discovery process, whether or not you can safely cheat depends on your particular makeup and what your definition of cheating is. One person can enjoy some sweets or starchy foods and return easily to their healthy plan the next day, but another will be triggered to binge and may not return to their healthy plan for weeks or months. If you decide to take time away from your plan, I encourage you to draw the line at brain-healthy paleo. Splurging on bananas, salty nuts, and roasted sweet potatoes is much safer and healthier than crossing the line into the toxic realm of cookies, ice cream, and chips. It will also be easier to find your way back to your healthy plan afterward, since whole foods are less addictive. Isn't eating healthier more expensive? Eating healthy whole foods doesn't need to be more expensive and will usually save you money. Because of Western society's long-standing aversion to red meat, organ meats, and animal fat, some of the most nutritious animal foods are also some of the least expensive. Dark meat poultry, higher fat ground beef, eggs, mussels, liver, pork butt, etc. When you eat a lower insulin diet, you're less hungry, you need less food, and you buy less food. You save lots of money on snacks and sugary beverages. You'll be healthier, so you can potentially save money on prescription medications, medical appointments, and medical procedures. What about addictive eating? Academics continue to debate whether addiction to refined carbohydrates and ultra-processed foods is a real phenomenon. But as a psychiatrist who has worked with thousands of patients over more than 2 decades, and as a human being who has personally struggled with this issue for 5 decades, I'm convinced these addictions are real, that they are powerful, and that they represent a formidable threat to public health. I hesitate to refer to this growing scourge as food addiction because whole plant and animal foods don't inspire destructive eating behaviors, whereas factory-made products have drug-like properties because they contain substances that have been extracted from foods, concentrated, and mixed together to create flavor, texture, and macronutrient profiles that most people find irresistible. Addictions to these substances can be more difficult to manage than addictions to drugs or alcohol in many cases, because you can live and thrive without drugs and alcohol for the rest of your life, but you can't live or thrive without eating regularly. Every time you eat, you're challenged to make a healthy choice, and that's very difficult, particularly in our modern, intoxicating food environment. It's like asking a recovering alcoholic to walk into a bar whenever they feel thirsty and somehow summon the strength to ask for water each and every time. It's not easy. Being in ketosis is much like wearing a suit of armor that goes a long way toward protecting you against the temptations of our addictive food environment. When you're burning fat for energy in between meals, your brain feels satisfied, so your appetite hormones won't be pestering you for sugar. Most people find it much easier to turn down unhealthy foods when they're in ketosis. But ketosis is not a miracle cure. Keto can curb cravings from the inside, but cravings can still be triggered from the outside. Images, aromas, social situations, stress can all waken the beast. Most addictive eaters have to battle a lifelong psychological vulnerability to overeating no matter what diet we follow. If you identify as an addictive eater, I've placed resources in Appendix B in your accompanying PDF to get you started on your recovery journey. But here are a few tips. Make a shopping list before going to the store and stick to it. Don't shop when you're hungry. Stay away from convenience stores. Consider asking someone else to do your grocery shopping or use a grocery delivery service, especially when you're feeling particularly vulnerable. Connect with others who are dealing with the same issue so you can support and learn from each other. Identify the products that you find most difficult to resist and redesign your daily patterns to avoid those as much as possible. Notice activities and situations that take your mind off of food and incorporate more of those into your life. What about exercise? Exercise is one of the pillars of excellent metabolic health. While it's true you can't out-exercise a bad diet, it's also true that you can't achieve optimal metabolic health through diet alone. Exercise works wonders for mood, energy, sleep, and metabolism. Exercise improves carbohydrate tolerance, brain blood flow, metabolic flexibility, and insulin sensitivity, and builds confidence, stamina, vitality, and strength. A key difference between plants and animals that we didn't cover in this book is that animals are designed to move. Don't be a plant. Find activities you enjoy and get moving. All types of exercise are healthy, but strength training and high-intensity interval training are more metabolically stimulating and time-efficient than prolonged, repetitive aerobic exercises such as running and biking. Remember to take it easy with exercise during the early phase of keto adaptation. Let your energy level be your guide. If you're an athlete hoping to maintain your current activity level while adapting to a ketogenic or carnivore diet, you may need to make adjustments to the plans in this audiobook to support your performance goals. See Appendix B in your accompanying PDF for resources. Staying the course. Anything worth accomplishing takes effort, and you are worth the effort. You must invest in yourself to see change. Striving, learning, and improving as you reach new goals builds confidence, character, and self-respect. Behind every no is a yes. When you say no to cake, French fries, and candy bars, what are you saying yes to instead? Remind yourself of the goals you set out to accomplish and why they are important to you. There is some sacrifice involved in this journey, but the rewards can be nothing short of life-changing. Mourn the loss of the foods that have caused you the most suffering and celebrate the benefits you're enjoying as a result of letting them go. Wishing you good mental health. I'm excited for you to discover what's possible as you begin exploring the powerful connection between how you eat and how you feel. Maybe it's not your genes, your childhood, your trauma history, your stress level, or some mysterious chemical imbalance in your brain that is making you depressed, anxious, unstable, unfocused, or forgetful. Maybe, at least in part, your mental health concerns have a potentially reversible metabolic and nutritional explanation. The best way to determine if this is the case is to change your diet and see if it changes your mind. Acknowledgements. This book builds upon the ideas, talent, and hard work of so many others. My intellectual heroes who think big thoughts, ask new questions, challenge pre-existing beliefs, do their own homework, and push knowledge forward. Thank you, Nina Teicholz, Amber O'Hearn, Dr. Ben Bickman, Gary Taubes, Dr. Jason Fung, Dave Feldman, Dr. Mike Eads, Belinda Fetke, Dr. Thomas Seyfried, Nicolette Hahn-Nyman, and Dr. Tim Noakes. My clinician researcher heroes who refuse to accept the limitations of conventional care, remain open-minded and curious, possess the humility to believe, respect, and learn from their patients, seek new ways to help them, and then do the hard work of analyzing and publishing their findings so that others may benefit. These include Dr. Sarah Hallberg, Dr. Stephen Finney, Dr. Jeff Volek, Dr. Eric Westman, and Dr. David Unwin. My metabolic psychiatry heroes, pioneering colleagues who are changing the way we think about, feel about, study, and treat mental illnesses. Thank you, Dr. Ian Campbell, Dr. Shabani Sethi, Dr. Cynthia Kalkin, Dr. Ignacio Quaranta, Bitten Johnson, and Dr. Jen Unwin. And a special thank you to Professor Stephen Cunnane and Dr. Adrian Soto-Mota for their expert reviews of my biochemistry chapter. I am deeply grateful to Jan Ellison-Bazuki for valuing and supporting not only my work, but the work of so many others in this exciting new field, and for knitting us together into a collaborative community. Thank you for spearheading the metabolic psychiatry revolution. We could not have dreamed up a more capable champion for the cause. I also have a special place in my heart for Dr. Albert Danat, whose devotion to his patients accidentally culminated in the world's largest inpatient study of ketogenic diets for serious mental illness. Albert, it was an honor and a privilege to help you bring your work to light. My nutrition professional heroes, independent thinkers who dared to break the mold and who skillfully teach people how to implement metabolically sound dietary strategies into their lives. Thank you, Denise Potter, Lily Nichols, Diana Rogers, Amy Berger, Franziska Spritzler, Dr. Adele Height, Dr. Zoe Harcombe, Ulrika Gonder, Yulia Tulipan, and Miriam Kalamian. I am particularly grateful to Patricia Daly for transmogrifying my unorthodox dietary philosophies into recipes and meal plans for this book, and to Beth Zupek-Kania, expert among experts, for her careful review of chapters pertaining to ketogenic diet science and implementation. Mission-driven conference organizers, community builders, and clinician influencers who have welcomed me onto their stages and virtual platforms, helping me grow an audience for the ideas that inspired this book, particularly Doug Reynolds, Pam Devine, Dr. Aaron Blaisdell, Dr. Jeff Gerber, Dr. Rod Taylor, Dr. Andreas Einfeld, Tio Prasetyo, Dr. John Schoonby, Dr. Ken Berry, Dr. James Greenblatt, Dr. David Perlmutter, Dr. Paul Mason, Dr. Brett Scher, Sam Feltham, Dr. Lenica von der Grient, Dr. Angela Puff, Victoria Field, Dr. Dom D'Agostino, and my editor at Psychology Today, Kaja Perina. Special thanks to Josephine and Stefan Barbarino for magical conference experiences in the Swiss Alps and for going above and beyond in supporting this book project by hosting me as your first scientist in residence in Burghausen, Germany. The people with lived experience who generously shared their personal stories for the book so that others may benefit from their journeys, including Ian Campbell, Carl Windenwood, Penny Figtree, Fran, Eric, Lisa, and others who chose to remain anonymous. Thanks also to all the patients I've had the privilege of working with over the past 20-plus years. You have been my greatest sources of inspiration and my greatest teachers. The publishing professionals who gave of their time and talents to help make this book a reality, including Stuart Horwitz, Emily Heckman, and everyone on the staff at Hachette GCP Balance. I'm especially grateful to my literary agent Alex Glass and my editor Nana Tomasi for believing in this project from the beginning, helping me develop it for a general audience, and for patiently guiding me through the dizzying corn maze that is the commercial publishing process. My cherished inner circle of friends, family, and colleagues who encouraged me, tolerated me, and helped me through what turned out to be the most challenging professional task I have ever voluntarily undertaken. I apologize again for being so unavailable for so long, and I know I have a lot of work to do to rebalance the scales. For time spent poring over chapter drafts, I'm indebted to Terry Corona for laughing and gasping in all the right places, to Dr. Jane Farley for pithy commentary, to Gloria Negers for offering the valuable dual perspective of clinician and lay reader, and to Eileen Rakowskis for advocating for readers without a science background. Extra special thanks to you, Eileen, for providing invaluable logistical, emotional, and moral support for this project from start to finish, putting the paleo meal plans through their paces, running errands when deadlines were looming, reading and rereading chapters for tone and clarity, and repeatedly making both of your ears available at a moment's notice. Thank you to Christine Flannery for reminding me that some readers just want to be told what to do, and Dr. Leneke van der Grient for hosting us at her home in the Netherlands while we finished the manuscript. Truly gezellig. Additional thanks to Amber O'Hearn for her expert review of my carnivore diets chapter. Additional thanks also to Dr. Jen Unwin for lending eagle-eyed expertise to the opening chapters and serving up delicious victuals from her hot Aga range cooker. And to Dr. David Unwin for punctuating our manuscript time with hunting owls, menacing cows, and lovely strolls through the rewilded English countryside. I'm grateful to Jennifer Bullock, PhD to be, for her invaluable research assistance. Thank you also to Dr. Gail Gorin, Dr. Michaela Malott, and Dr. Jennifer Harris, who have all stuck by me since residency and provided wise counsel, even as I have ventured beyond the boundaries of traditional psychiatric practice into the wild west of nutritional and metabolic psychiatry. Special thanks to my multi-talented sister, Sherry Eade, for countless hours of deliciously expert recipe testing and recipe editing, as well as many other forms of assistance, both tangible and intangible, including recording and annotating chapters that needed special attention. Your support means the world to me. And deep gratitude to my mother, Mary Eade, who will be 90 years old when this book is published. An attentive professional caregiver and fierce advocate for adults with intellectual disabilities, it is her emotional intelligence, work ethic, kindness, creativity, generosity, and sense of humor that I aspire to embody in my own professional and personal life. Thanks for believing in me, always being there for me, and for helping me not take myself too seriously. I am so proud to be your daughter. And Susie Smith, my partner in every sense of the word, for caring about, sacrificing for, and working on this book every bit as much as I did. Thank you for your boundless patience with my many shortcomings, your unwavering love and support, and for everything you've done to make everything I've done in the past 10 years more visually engaging, easier to digest, and a lot more fun. As our friend Dr. Jen Unwin is fond of saying, everybody needs a Susie. This has been a Hachette audio production of Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind, a powerful plan to improve mood, overcome anxiety, and protect memory for a lifetime of optimal mental health, by Dr. Georgia Eade, MD. This has been The Author. Produced by Debalina Matra. Directed by Suzanne Torin. Recorded by Alex Allenson at the Bridge Sound and Stage Recording Studios in Cambridge, Massachusetts. Post-production by Ryan de Guzman. Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind, a powerful plan to improve mood, overcome anxiety, and protect memory for a lifetime of optimal mental health is also available in print and as an ebook from Balance, an imprint of Grand Central Publishing, a subsidiary of Hachette Book Group, Incorporated. For more Hachette audio productions, visit us at hachetteaudio.com. Thank you for listening. Text copyright 2024 by Georgia Eade. Audio production copyright 2024, Hachette Audio. All rights reserved. Hachette Book Group supports the right to free expression and the value of copyright. The purpose of copyright is to encourage writers and artists to produce the creative works that enrich our culture. The duplicating, uploading, and distribution of this audiobook without permission is a theft of the author's intellectual property. If you would like permission to use material from the audiobook, other than for review purposes, please contact permissions at hbgusa.com. Thank you for your support of the author's rights.
Audible hopes you've enjoyed this program.